Signal Sciences secures the most important web applications, APIs, and microservices of the world's leading companies. Protecting over 7,500 applications and 150 billion production requests per week, Signal Sciences Next-Gen WAF and RASP help companies increase security and maintain site reliability without sacrificing velocity, all at the lowest total cost of ownership. Signal Sciences' patented technology protects any application against any attack, with integrations into any DevOps toolchain. Signal Sciences, demand more from your WAF. Learn more at signalsciences.com/PSW. The greatest threat to businesses today isn't the outsider trying to get in. It's the people you trust, the ones who already have the keys, your employees, contractors, and privileged users. 60% of online attacks are carried out by insiders. To stop these insider threats, you need to see what users are doing before an incident occurs. Observe It enables security teams to detect risky user activity, investigate incidents in minutes, and effectively respond. Get your free trial at observeit.com/securityweekly.
Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by John Strand and Lee Neely. These days, it's rarely a case of if you'll be hacked, and more a question of when. Once the attacker is past your defenses, they cover their tracks and systematically infiltrate your network to steal information or shut down your business. You need to rethink the way security is delivered for your digitally transformed business, and there's one security solution that delivers it all: NetScout. Get visibility without borders for consistent detection, mitigation, and prevention across any network, data center, cloud, 5G, and more. Learn more at securityweekly.com/NetScout. Security Weekly will be at Hacker Halted in Atlanta, Georgia this October 10th and 11th. EC Council is offering our listeners a 15% discount to sit for any of their boot camp courses or workshops. Visit securityweekly.com/Hacker Halted to register now. All right, gentlemen, let's get into the news for the week. A lot of identity announcements this week on the product announcement side.
Mm-hmm. I think the Ping one was the biggest one for me. This is huge.
Yeah, Ping had actually two announcements here, right? They had the updates to their multi-factor authentication solution, and then tied to the article, John, you and I covered 2 weeks ago with Paul on their API stuff is the Tibco partnership announcement on some API security stuff.
Yep. And I think that those both really tie together. Whenever you're looking at like FIDO, biometric authenticators, so whenever you bypass two-factor authentication in a phishing attack, the way it usually works is you create a web page that looks like a legitimate authentication page for the victim. The victim enters their user ID, their password, and then you ask them for the Google Authenticator or whatever their PIN is or their SMS. And then they enter that in that intermediary page. Meanwhile, while that intermediary page is harvesting those credentials, it's then authenticating with them on the back end. So what you can do is you can use like U2FA, where you can use like a UB key, and you have to have something. It's something you know and something that'll change, and then something you have. And then with FIDO, you can actually have it do the facial recognition and some of the biometrics as well. And that's really trying to lock down that authentication even more. And this is monstrous because if this is implemented properly, I'm going to put an asterisk next to that, that will actually stop a large number of different attacks. Now, the asterisk, the problem with this is what happens with many two-factor authentication schemes is whenever the device is perceived to not have that capability for the FIDO standard or U2FA, a lot of the different sites that you go to will default to a lower level of security, either shutting off two-factor completely or going to a reduced security two-factor authentication scheme, like a simple SMS message being sent in.
Got it.
But there's some cool stuff in Ping where you can configure the authentication fallback and what the conditions are.
Yep,
which
absolutely.
I've used a bit. So, which we like to make a difference. Say you're on the corporate network, you'll accept the Kerberos ticket, but when I'm coming in from home, you better be giving me that multi-factor authentication because I don't trust your home computer, particularly if you're on grandma's computer that the kids use. Come on, forget that one.
And I think that gets to the heart of the matter is that fallback. How do you actually fall back? And I think, you look at Ping, and Ping has been doing this as long as anybody else, and I really like where they're going. It's just, this is one of those things where, Lee, I want to get your opinion on this. It seems, your vendor can give you amazing tools, but it has to be implemented by the customer, and that's where the problem starts to come into place.
Well, actually, the folks I've worked with implementing Ping have spent years learning about the capabilities. When we started, it was like, can we get it to authenticate and make SAML 2.0 work at all, right? Your
And
basics.
yeah,
And then learning how to add these other layers. It was a process. You got to learn how to eat the elephant.
yeah. And Ping back in the day, dating myself a little bit, you're going back to like 2006, 2005. They were best in class at actually making, SAML authentication work the way it was supposed to. And they've been a good, solid company in the space for a long time.
Yeah,
There's
they've been
another-
making really good
Go ahead.
improvements. This announcement, but like I said, we covered the API stuff because this new emergence of how do you authenticate your APIs across all these microservices layers in your new applications, that's a new layer of authentication that has to be addressed as we continue to, adopt these new kind of application technologies.
Yeah. Go ahead, Lee.
I'd say there's another piece in there that's kind of new, and that is deciding what level of authentication your various apps need. I mean, there are layers, if you get into the government space, we talk about the identity assurance layer and the authentication assurance layer. But the point is, maybe there's an app that you run that you're okay if you come in with, Facebook authentication, but another app you want, a hard two-factor, and another one you're good with a soft token. Having the discipline to identify what level you want on your applications is a new area for a lot of folks, and they just think, well, they're all the same, right?
And it's funny you mentioned that because I want to say it was Monday this week or Friday last week. We were talking to a customer, and they're like, "We want you to come in and test our API. It's the same API, and we've got like 5 different web services that connect into it, and we've got about 14 different web apps that connect into this API." I'm like, how many calls does this API support? And they're like, we think about 3,000. So they were using the exact same API for services, the exact same API for users. And you can see how that becomes a nightmare, right? Like you were talking about the segmentation of you're a user. This is the authentication we need for your API. Here's a service where you have 2 services that are talking to each other in the cloud. That's a completely different authentication requirement there. But when you start mixing the 2, that's where things go horribly wrong.
What could go wrong, John?
Absolutely nothing.
Sorry. The other news is, on identity, like I said, a lot of identity is the BeyondTrust in the privilege access management updates. Now, BeyondTrust is interesting. I'm not sure people understand that BombGuard, Avecto, BeyondTrust all came together, adopted the BeyondTrust brand, I think is what they ended up doing. Now what you're seeing is really the integration of all those pieces that Thoma Bravo bought coming together and enhancing their privilege access capabilities here.
Yeah, I think this is good. The more that we can come up with some type of standardization, I think that we're going to be better. And I think BeyondTrust has been in this a long time. So I think this is definitely a good move. And I would encourage organizations, if you're thinking PAM and you're thinking pluggable authentication modules, you're old. Welcome to the same place I'm at. But look at privileged access management. Privileged access management is absolutely something that will slow down attackers in your environment.
Agreed. And making it easy to do privileged access, I think, is one of the big challenges. And I think what BeyondTrust here is trying to do is to make that a lot easier to get broader adoption, because we all know that that's a better way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives you centralized capabilities to manage those roles and how they work. And I was really excited to see them talking about they're adding the Mac support. And I'm going, if you've got the Mac, where's Linux? You're right there. Because I come from an environment where I've got lots of all 3. So
yeah,
I like things that'll work in more than one. But it was a huge win just rolling out on Windows, just to be able to allow users to do certain things. Like mobile users, they don't need an admin account if all we can do is allow them to manage their network sort of configuration when they're on the fly. It's a huge win. You can reduce some of that, and then other things we can allow and monitor better. It's exciting.
Yep.
Good. It's great. This next article, when I first read it, A10 Networks announces a container-based solutions. I was thinking container security for a second. And no, what they've done is they've taken some of their products, made them container ready, And what I thought was interesting here is up to 200 gigabits of throughput for some of their applications. Look, there are hardware-based devices out there that aren't doing 200 gigabits
Right?
of throughput. So how the heck are they doing it in containers?
I thought the same thing. I'm not going to question it, because what the hell, the way there, I think every single month there's something that just dumbfounds me, and this is definitely one of those things. But no, more power to them. One of the things, guys, that's going to be coming out here is currently Mike Felch at BHIS is working on Cloud API. I don't want to say it's a hacking tool or an auditing tool, but you feed it in credentials and it'll automatically enumerate all the different web services and API services and cloud services that are accessible for this specific type of account. And the reason why I love this is because this is yet another possible entry point. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but whenever you're trying to tie together all these different containers from Azure to Google Cloud to Amazon, and then you throw another product on top of it. For me as an attacker, I just get giddy because it's increasing the complexity. And it may be necessary, right, that we have to increase that complexity for management, but still, it just makes my heart glow as an attacker.
Yes, it would, of course. I think it is a new entry point, which is why I think API security and understanding those endpoints is so important. And then how do you protect them? My question for this announcement with A10, though, is are people going to deploy some of these capabilities themselves as containers in the cloud, or are they just going to use the native cloud services? This might work on-prem where you got your own Kubernetes cluster running and you're just going to spin this thing up in your own kind of farm. But how much transportability does this have into the cloud environments, knowing what the cloud providers are doing themselves?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Infoblox announced Blox One Threat Defense, the industry's first hybrid security offering that leverages DNS as the first line of defense. Thoughts, John?
Wow. Yeah, we just talked about this just a second ago. DNS logs are a pain in the ass. But if you're in line, right? If you're running something like Brozeek, or the new stuff that's coming out from Gigamon, where you can actually use kind of a customized IPFix template to grab the DNS data that's required, then life is good. The thing that concerns me is, and I'd love to get you guys' thought on this, is just literally last week, the first ever, and I don't believe this is true, but the first ever malicious strain of malware, like Godula, was using DNS over HTTPS. And how do all these vendors that are moving very heavily into this DNS space, how are they going to handle that HTTPS or the DNS over HTTPS? That's going to be a problem.
Yeah. Well, look, we've had troubles just understanding how to inspect traffic that's HTTPS. Now, if you're tunneling DNS over it, that's got to be the same big challenges. How do you see what's going on?
Yep.
We used to have knockdown dragouts about whether we would allow encrypted traffic over the network because we couldn't see it anymore.
Right.
Years ago. It's the same thing again.
Yep.
It just hides it. It doesn't necessarily make it better.
Yeah.
Jason Wood and I covered last week on, talks about trying to lower the end-to-end encryption requirements because, some of the federal agencies and law enforcement, they're worried about not being able to get access to data to look for terrorists and other things, because if we do full end-to-end encryption, they won't have any visibility into that traffic. So, this is a really interesting dilemma. Is we want to protect our networks, which means we encrypt it, but then other people are like, well, if you encrypt it, we can't see if anything criminal is going on.
Yeah, and I'm a huge fan. And Lee, I want to get your opinion on this because I remember those knockdown, drag-out arguments. Government data aside, like whenever you're talking about the gig, the backbone, I think they're now going to update it. They're going to call it Jedi. I think that's the big thing with the cloud, government DoD cloud, that Microsoft and Amazon are fighting over right now. But for corporate networks, there shouldn't be a question. It should be encrypted absolutely everywhere, all the time. And the reason why is there's so many different attacks out there, like man-in-the-middle framework. If I can see anything HTTP going in between, the level of evil that I can insert is unspeakable. So just make sure that you're moving to encryption everywhere. Don't ever have those conversations that we had 15 years ago about visibility, because now the attack surface is so much worse if I can see anything unencrypted. But yeah, I'd love to get Lee's opinion on this too.
So I completely agree with you, actually, particularly in the corporate space, and in the space where we're trying to get rid of we're trying to blow out the perimeter. You want to make sure all that traffic is encrypted. And in the government space, one of the things I like about having encrypted as much as possible is that if you send the wrong kind of data down the network, you haven't done a public release. It's contained between the endpoints. I know that's a weird edge case, but it's reality in my world that we worry about that. But I think corporate data, I don't think there's enough protection as de facto. Maybe we go too far in the government space, but I see too much nonchalant just send the data in the corporate space, and I'm like, whoa, we need to have some encryption there, protect that stuff, make sure only the people that need to know can see it. Oh, sorry, government reference again.
Yeah. Yeah, I said, look, if we could just do the right thing with data encryption, we wouldn't need all these other technologies because nobody could access the data. Anyways.
Well, I like that, right? It's secure. Is it usable? Nah, but it's secure.
It's secure.
But even encrypted, we can still say what our nodes are talking to. We can still see what kind of communication patterns are going on. We can see the volume of that communication, even if it's opaque. If suddenly gigabytes are traveling between here and here, and that's normal,
weird.
Well, we can start pulling that thread.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Back to the point. I identify those outliers. You can still do that with encrypted traffic. You can still monitor for certain things and look for outliers, and then decide how you dig in and figure out what's actually going on. Yeah. Avast, AI and ML, John, they hired a new CTO to bring those ambitions to fruition. Should we wish him luck?
I think we should wish him luck. This is one of those things where they should have quietly done this. There should not have been a press release. Because I read this almost like, hey, everybody, we're 10 years behind everybody else. Here we go. This is so, I don't want to say passe, but this is expected, right? If you're looking at Silence, you're looking at CrowdStrike, looking at what Microsoft is doing, this is expected. This shouldn't be something that they're tooting their own horn on. I don't know. Maybe it's just bringing more focus to it. But absolutely, if you're in the endpoint security space and you aren't doing this, or not doing it at the level of like a Silence or a CrowdStrike or a Microsoft, you've got a tremendous amount of catch up to do.
Yes, agreed. I think they're one of the public companies I looked at, but their market cap was so low that I couldn't add them to the index. So now I know why. Maybe we'll see some changes. John, your favorite company, Chronicle, is joining Google Cloud.
Wow. It's funny. Whenever this came out, I'm like, weren't they already? I was confused for a second.
Well, they were part of Alphabet's Moonshot program. So they were an Alphabet company. Remember, Alphabet's now the parent that sits over top of Google, and it looks like they're going to take Chronicle that was sitting up at the Alphabet level and now bring it down and embed it with GCP.
And it's funny with this one. Remember we were talking about this when this first came out. If you're a SIM vendor, how the hell do you handle the Chronicle threat? Like, how do you answer to Chronicle? And we said that there were some paths, right? Like, you want to keep all of your data on-prem. Okay, there's some logic behind that, even though it's somewhat outdated. But it seems to me, and Matt, I really want to get your opinion on this, that vendors that are competing with what Chronicle backstory actually is, their entire approach is, but do you really want to give more data to Google? That seems to be their strategy to kind of deal with the marketing threat of Chronicle backstory. It's just basically, we're going to paint the Google boogeyman, and that's why you should buy our product. And I don't know if that's going to be a solid strategy, but you might have seen something different talking to some other vendors too.
No, I'm seeing the same thing, right? It's all about a trust factor of Google, and do you trust them with your data? The interesting part with Chronicle moving under Google Cloud, and Google Cloud looking to really work with the other cloud providers, because they think if they're the cloud of clouds that can interface with other clouds, and they pull it off. Think about the potential impact that Chronicle under the GCP umbrella could bring to cloud-based SIM. It could be huge.
It's totally devastating. One of the things, if I was a vendor and you're a small vendor, you have two choices at this point. Whenever you're looking at something like Google and Chronicle backstory, you either are going to try to fight them directly. Good luck with that, because the whole argument of do we trust Google or not? Screw it, we already do. The big question is going to be Google is trying to develop a marketplace. Can you develop a product that'll work in that Chronicle backstory ecosystem? And I think that's where a lot of people need to go. But that opens up more challenges because Google has an amazing history of saying, hey, that product's doing something really cool. Hey, let's write our own and completely knock them out of business. So, and with that, gentlemen, I need to step out. I'll talk to you all later.
Thanks, John.
Take care, John.
We got a couple more. So to John's point, Exabeam acquires SkyFormation, and SkyFormation integrates 30 different cloud services into the Exabeam SIM. So you're already seeing the impacts, I believe, of Chronicle and what Chronicle is going to do to the SIM, Lee, with now an acquisition, more integration into the cloud environment. This is almost a direct response to that Chronicle threat, I think.
Yeah. Take this Chronicle. Here comes Exabeam. I mean, getting all that data together, I agree, it's a trust issue, but it's the market space. I mean, you've got to help amalgamate and organize data for people to take action on it. But do you trust where it's being held? Do you trust what's integrating together? Do you trust an Israeli-based company or a company with its origin there? I mean, trust is getting pretty hard. You almost have to. What do you do anymore about the trust factor? Can you even play that card?
It's tough. I mean, look, I'm a big believer in building trust, especially in our community, because I don't think we do enough of it sometimes. But to your point, you've got the concerns with Google and privacy, maybe. You've got concerns with other foreign entities and what they do with the data. I think we have to do a better job of instilling trust. And I think the way that comes is we stop doing some of the crazy fear, uncertainty, doubt stuff that we've done traditionally in the past. We continue to build capabilities that continue to build trust and prove that trust. And then I think we're in a better position. But in the short term, Lee, I think it is a little difficult when you see some of this stuff going on is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, I think there's an opportunity for us to help people learn what sort of questions to ask about, to make a sufficiently, without, sending a 3,000 page questionnaire to a vendor to determine whether you can trust them. What are the important things to worry about? Because you can get down into the nuance in the end, and you'll be locked in what analysis paralysis, right? Not what we want. There's a lot of good companies out there that'll do just fine, but you have to be able to assess them. I'm worried that people don't assess them at all, and that's the wrong model too. I think there's just a few key questions you ask, and you're good. I mean, we know Google has boatloads of data, and really, I don't see that as a problem. They've got a lot of data protection work going on too. But how do you educate people about that? How do you educate about what these are doing? Like I said, get away from analysis paralysis, build some trust, but help people do it in a smart way.
Yeah, I think the first thing, Lee, that Paul and I really try to focus on when we talk to vendors is, what problem are you solving? How are you solving it uniquely or better than somebody else? And what value are you driving to the customer? Because if you can't articulate those three things, I don't know how you build any other trust with your capabilities or anything else. And so that's something Paul and I always try to extract out when we're talking to vendors is problem, solution, value. If you can't articulate that, how do you build trust with the community?
You can't. And what is your differentiator? Why are you cool? I mean, that's not very politically correct, but you're trying to tease that out. And what is that makes you the most awesome solution in the world? And getting their vision out there is also really helpful in where they want to go. From there, then you can do a reasonably balanced assessment on which of the 7 options to pick that are in front of you on the table.
Exactly. Then you can do some evaluation criteria and make your final pick. But you got to narrow down the 85 endpoint vendors down to a handful that you can actually evaluate.
Yeah. And by the way, don't throw your entire security standard at that evaluation. You've got to come up with core issues, not, don't hand them ISO 27001 and say, will you show me how you meet this, please?
Yeah. Yeah, Paul and I at some point want to work on some evaluation criteria because we did a lot of this at Tenable, and we think there is a gap for people to really know, based on the capabilities I'm interested in, how should I evaluate different technologies? It's something we've talked about for a while. Eventually, we'll get there. But yeah, I agree with you, Lee. You got to really know what you're looking for and make sure you're asking the right questions to evaluate. Otherwise, you'll bury yourself and the vendor.
Yeah. And waste a lot of time.
Yeah. Two quick acquisition announcements. Accenture, right? Yeah. Yes. Accenture buys BCT Solutions out of Australia. And what I found interesting on this one is because they're Canberra-based, which means they're more on the federal side of the house. It looks like Accenture is growing some cybersecurity on the Australia national defense side. I don't know that this helps them in the U.S. Again, but maybe it does. Curious, any thoughts on this one, Lee?
Well, I know that on the federal side that the Australian security folks have some really good standards and models that we use as reference. And I'm thinking, could they be playing that to then back into the U.S., a similar market in the U.S., just because some of the Australian stuff is really best practice. But that might be a bit of a stretch. Don't. I'm just thinking it could really help them back into the gov space over here.
Yeah, maybe it was a better way to break into the Fed space by going to Australia. Maybe it was a better acquisition for them than trying to do something here in the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, what is this? The Australian Signals Directorate that puts out all the cyber guidance, if I'm remembering right. That could be a fractured memory, but yeah, I'm thinking, yeah, they could back in here, and once they got Australia going, they could probably have a path to other the Five Eyes.
Yeah,
it'll be interesting to see how this goes.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how this next one goes. Broadcom and Symantec near major cybersecurity deal.
Wonder. I mean, I think of Broadcom as a network company, and I was kind of surprised to see wonder what the joint between them and Symantec would be, but it could be very interesting.
Yeah, so this is interesting to me. One, after a couple things that have been going on that are interesting to me. When CrowdStrike comes out on the IPO and they blow through Symantec's valuation on the first day of the IPO, everybody's poo-pooing Symantec. And Symantec, look, I've always said Symantec has what do I want to be when I grow up problem. Do they want to be a consumer security company or do they want to be an enterprise security company? Because they have both. And I think it's hard to serve two masters, personally. I just think it's really difficult. And so I think that's pulled Symantec back a little bit. Then you have Broadcom buying CA last year, and CA was building a really interesting security portfolio. Yeah. I don't think a lot of people knew what CA was doing. They had bought Veracode and SourceClear. They already had some application security components. They had a pretty broad identity security play with some of their identity stuff. And, so Broadcom buys CA, which is interesting, right? Because you take this hardware semiconductor company who buys a software company. Whoa. They spin off Veracode. Now, this news broke last week, right before the holiday, that Broadcom was interested in Symantec, and now you're seeing this perpetuate down to the point where we might have a deal happening here in the next few weeks. Broadcom's really going after some interesting software and security assets, and I'm not quite sure what they're going to do with them, but it's intriguing to watch.
You would see a meetup between the CA identity management and Symantec owns LifeLock, the identity protection company. Yep. So there's a meet there down at that level, and there's probably more connections there that I'm just not aware of. It might be a really nice fit for them in the long term, but I can imagine that what you wind up with is the Broadcom network security entity in some sort of a division, and Symantec doing all the software and CA stuff over here, regardless of the labels at the top, and then that would allow them to not lose their focus, because I'm worried if those aren't necessarily aligned missions between the two halves. But it could be really exciting.
I don't think they are, and that's been the challenge with Symantec, in my opinion, for a while.
Yeah. So what are they going to be when they grow up? Like you said, it'll be an interesting. That is a huge deal. Did I read that right? $117 billion deal.
No, that
Something like
was
that?
Broadcom's
that was
attempt to buy Qualcomm last year that was blocked. The valuation on Symantec's right about $15 billion right now in the public market. So we'll see what the deal that transpires. I can't remember the CA acquisition amount, but I think it was in the hundreds of billions of dollars, if I'm not mistaken. I'll have to go back and look.
Some crazy numbers.
Yeah, crazy numbers. All right, Lee, thanks for finishing the news with me. We'll take a short break, then welcome Craig Taylor from CyberHoop.